Hello, world. Welcome to the Pocket Gamer podcast with your hosts, me, Brian Baglow, and our doyen of data, the maven herself, Peggy Ann Salts. Hello, Peggy. How are you?
I am fine. You are so gracious when you introduce me every time, Brian. I have to think of something for you. Maestro comes to mind, but I have to be more imaginative than that. So our guest today is going to talk about growth because that's what he does, right? He's vice president of growth at Tilting Point. He has a long career, 15 years in advertising, mobile gaming. He's also played a crucial role in the success of hits like SpongeBob, Krusty Cook-Off, right? But his personal life is another story because he is about growth. But in his personal life, he's not afraid to literally go downhill, not businesslike, but go downhill because he used to compete in downhill skiing many years ago, maybe not so many. The thrill and challenge of this sport taught him valuable lessons about focus and resilience. I think we'll hear those as well. So, Enric Pedró, with a build up like that, how can this not be an awesome show? Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Well, thank you very much.
Um, Enrique, welcome. It's lovely to have you here. I'm keen to know more. So, tell us a little bit more about your journey, how you got into games, and what it's been like to see so many of your projects have such great global success.
I always been passionate about digital advertising and gaming. I've been involved in, as Peggy said earlier, I've been involved with mobile for many years now. Actually, I go back before even gaming, working with one of the first MMPs in the space, talking about many years ago. So I've seen a lot of changes, and yes, I've always been an avid gamer myself. Now I'm a quote unquote proper adult, so I don't have so much time for what I call proper gaming, yet I still play some mobile games. So I just, I have less time, so I still invest some time on mobile games. Although there are some mobile games that require a lot of your time and perhaps money. So you need to be careful with that one too. But I had, yes, as you mentioned earlier, I have had the privilege to work with nowadays many well-known IPs or branded games, and it's always great to see people talking or playing the games that you have been working on. So it's one, when I get asked the question, not that often, but I get the question, what do you like the most about the job that you do? Is when it can be as simple as going throughout the comments on the latest post that we made about a game and seeing that players that actually love to play the game that our team has put together, and they have these, you can tell that there is behind the numbers and the cost per installs and the retargeting campaigns, there is actually a human being who is actually enjoying playing the games that we are promoting or that my team is promoting. So it's a great pleasure of mine that sometimes we tend to forget that we are in the business of making or doing games, and these games are meant to you know make people have fun or to enjoy themselves playing on a mobile device. And that's probably what passions me the most right now, is just getting thinking that I'm empowering these people to get to know better and more better and improved games that we're developing at the Point Two.
You mentioned IP, and I want to sort of dive into that if we can, because you're working on an absolutely monster license at the moment, literally, with the new Godzilla versus Kong Titan Chasers game. So, can you tell us more about how that came to be? And there's a great link here, folks, because I know for a fact that one of my favourite studios here in Scotland, one of the most northerly, if not the most northerly game studio in the country, Hunted Cow are the team behind it. So, how did you come to be producing this absolutely monster?
So and yes, kudos to the guys at Hunted Cows who they have been doing a great work so far. We have been working with them with two titles already. The latest one, which has been a few years now, is the Warhammer Chaos and Conquest game. So they are now hands-on mostly on working on this game, because as you well said, it's Godzilla versus Kong, which is indeed, as the name states, it's based on the well-known IP. Recently, there's been a movie release. There's been as well a TV show on Apple Plus. So we are lucky that this IP is becoming again prevalent in the space. And as such, we thought that it was a great opportunity to try to leverage our existing expertise in the Forex space, or to put it more specifically, hunted cows expertise in the Forex space, to actually add this well-known IP, which hopefully helps us to engage a specific audience that we think fits well with this game engine that we have already available, as well as with the IP that many people are know or love. It's as I mentioned already, it's a well-known IP. Actually, I wasn't so aware on how much hype, how many fans there are behind Kong and Godzilla, down to knowing, I have Star Trek behind me, so you know all about the Trekkies.
Yeah.
But I wasn't aware of the how many big Godzilla and Kong fans were, and they are really into the lore. So it's great to see how the team is putting together all this lore, which obviously needs to get the approval from the IP owner or Legendary, who is the licensor of this game, which goes along the lines of what the movie is about. So obviously, it's great to be an extension, to call it somehow, of this movie, and hopefully we make many fans happy with being able to spend or invest some of their time in one of their more or one of their most loved IPs is in the space.
How do smaller studios, how do smaller companies, kind of really leverage that? How do you get into IP if you're not building your own original content? How do smaller companies tap into the new cultural trends and start to find licenses that they can potentially work with? And what are the risks and rewards?
It's a good point, Brian, because obviously I'm coming from Tilting Point, obviously big company or well-known company. We have, and people say, of course, this guy is coming with the big guns, talking about being able to work with the Legendary. How am I going to suppose I'm a small studio, one guy or two, small team. I barely make the means or ends meet at the end of the month. I wish I had the chance. These are reliable. How the hell I'm going to be working with a Legendary to create or to develop a Godzilla and versus Kong game? There's nothing I can learn from this. And actually, I was thinking about it, and for a small developer, there is still a chance that you can see it. You can currently see it if you go on TikTok or YouTube. You will see all these ASMR videos. For instance, I actually was seeing it this morning. There is a trend I've been seeing for a few months now. It's about cleaning carpets. So you see a really dirty carpet, and then you see someone who uses like therefore machines, and like okay, you can see like there is no way this carpet is gonna be cleaned up, and after 6 minutes of deep cleaning, it becomes like a brand new carpet. So guess what? There are several game developers who are now promoting games which are based on cleaning carpets. So it's just they use the same. They use the idea of the SMR of like I'm cleaning carpets and I'm gonna build a game based on cleaning carpets. It doesn't sound too exciting, yet when you see the gameplay, and it's like an extension or like an extension is you're leveraging an existing audience, so it's probably close to what maybe hyper casual might be. But it's to your question, Brian, that's a great example on how a smaller studio can leverage not necessarily a big IP that is going to come, and we can talk about it later on. It comes obviously with a price and some legal, and it's complicated and it's a lot of time invested there. But obviously, for a small developer, there is no need for you to get a license to do a cleaning carpet game. So, and the same goes with characters who might be or not brands, but characters that are they have been available they have been public domain characters, that is. They have been available for centuries, and as such, you can still create or develop a game based on that. So another example could be, okay, I cannot use, again, Godzilla and Kong because these are characters owned by the IP licensor Legendary, but still, I mean, sure, you can think about Dracula, Frankenstein, and the likes. These
Loch
are
Ness
like
Monster?
Loch Ness
Hmm.
monsters, for instance. Indeed, you can say, well, but many people have done a great game about this. Yes, but you can always find a spin or maybe think about not necessarily monsters, but there is a full repertoire of characters and IPs, to call it somehow, that are available for free in the space. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're stuck with having to deal with high price points and minimum guarantees and royalties and whatnot. You can still leverage public domain characters, or as I was saying earlier, content that is available that it's signals that are telling you or telling the developer, hey, there is an audience, or there's a potential audience fit here, and we can think of a game engine or of a game mechanic that can fit that specific trend. So that's probably how I would. Well, that's how I would advise smaller teams to try to leverage these trends or culture.
Just wanted to zoom back out for a moment and be very clear about why well-known IP, even if it's in the public domain like a Dracula, why that is a good thing. Because studios believe that when they leverage well-known IP, they can impact the game's market reception, commercial hit, or player engagement. We love these characters and we're going to play, and it's going to be sort of a slam dunk here. I'm just curious, is that still the case, or is the overall value of IP different? Is it something that's, across the full funnel? Is it just to do great UA? I mean, what is the value of doing this? What are you seeing?
It really depends on the type of IP integration that you're going to be leveraging. I would put, just to simplify, because you can get in a lot of deep into the detail, or the rabbit hole of IP licensors. But I will categorize in two types. One type is the short license, which is going to last 2 weeks, a month, and we can probably talk about later on about the work that we have done with big brands or well-known brands and how we leverage that in specific games. That is going to be an IP integration that lasts, as I said, 2 weeks, a month, and that probably has more of a UA component where we're trying to leverage a well-known brand. That's like, hey, we're leveraging this well-known brand to tie it to our games in hopes that it's going to reduce, for instance, the cost per install, and perhaps if the integration is well done, quote unquote, within the game, it might see as well an increase on LTV, because players ultimately are going to be spending more because, hey, I know this brand, or I love this brand, I'm going to spend, or I love this influencer, so I'm going to be buying their skin, or I'm going to be buying their in-game item, which is time limited. And as such, you're going to see first a decrease on cost per install, and as well you get more creative, not freedom, but necessarily, but you have more creative repertoire for you to be able to leverage this brand. And two, within the in-game integration, as I said earlier, you get the players are like, oh, this is a limited time integration. I love this character or this brand. I'm gonna buy this item because I love it. Period. So you can see an increase in LTV. That's the first category, which is the point that probably most people have in mind. But probably you see Tilting Point and the likes doing, where they keep announcing these IP integrations happening on an ongoing basis. You can see this happening on Google Play and the App Store, where you see a limited promotion or an event card of a specific event that only lasts 2 weeks or a month. That's one. The second one is it's a long-term integration where the game is based on that license or that IP. So Tilting Point is well known for that too. You mentioned earlier, Peggy, about SpongeBob Krusty Cook-Off. We released a new game that was 8 months ago now, and another SpongeBob game called Adventures. We have a game for Narcos. We're developing a name for Godzilla. We have an upcoming game for Avatar, not the blue guys, the cartoon, the Nickelodeon one, and so on and so forth. So that's a different type of IP integration. Obviously, this is we're leveraging a license to leverage, and then we're using a game engine, and we're putting the license on top. So we think, okay, what's gonna be the best license that's gonna fit our available game engine, or the other way around. We know that this license is open to do a game. Which game engines we believe can fit to this narrative? Because I'm just putting it back to the example with the small developers and cleaning carpets. It's unlikely. I mean, maybe I'm proven wrong in a few months, and then it's a great, and it's a mobile, it's a game hit. But I doubt you're gonna see a game about cleaning a card-based or turn-based cleaning carpet game, because it doesn't make any sense. Yet, if you see a game which is an upper casual game, well, I don't know, Brian, maybe I give you a great idea there, but I doubt you see the spin there. It's quite unlikely you're gonna see a turn-based cleaning carpet game, or it's gonna be super niche and interesting game, but I will be surprised if it's a commercial success. Happy to be proven wrong. On the other hand, you could say like, okay, it's a fast cleaning game. It's like a casual, where with your finger, like you are cleaning throughout the carpet. So the faster you go, the more points you get. and so on. So that's hyper casual type of game where you should there is a clear feel like okay, it took me 20 seconds to put together to think or like to do a brainstorm on how I can apply this cleaning carpet content into a game. The same goes with an IP or with a long-term work that we do with a game based on an IP, where we say, okay, how this IP can fit into the game engine that we have, or the other way around. We know this IP is available, how we can make it work, if we can make it work. Because don't get me wrong, you'll hear about yes, we're working with Godzilla and Avatar and SpongeBob, but you do not hear about all the licensors and all the IPs that we have checked that either they're not available or they're too expensive or they're not a good fit for the game engines that we have available at the theme park.
There are opportunities. You pointed that out. We can have, the characters we know. We can look at TikTok and get into some trends and be very creative. And yes, a carpet cleaning game. And who knows, Enric, if we see a flood of them, we'll know where they came from. You were the inspiration. But that tells us that there is often overlooked sources of IP that could be more accessible, more affordable for smaller developers. Maybe you can just go a little deeper in there for everyone who doesn't want to do a carpet cleaning game. And also a little bit of advice for the smaller studios looking to use IP more creatively. You talked about levels to which you can integrate it. Let's try and push the envelope a little bit, inspire our listeners and give them some thoughts about, what can they take in terms of IP and how far they can take it.
So the first and obvious one, which I have been alluding to earlier, is does the IP or I'm gonna say the idea or the niche fits with my core target audience? Because either as a game developer, you either have a game engine that you already you can fast turn around the game development of that set idea, or you're starting from scratch and like, hey, I have 6 months, a year and a half to develop. I say a game engine. That's like the game mechanic that on top we're gonna add the IP. So that's the first one. Is obviously that, as I was saying earlier too, is that IP adaptable to gaming. I gave the example of the carpet cleaning. You just keep going to that. There might be other ideas which might not be so relatable to gaming, yet keep going with the cleaning genre. I know that there is a power washing game which has been super popular on Steam. There is another game about managing a supermarket, which is like literally you're putting, you're a cashier and you're a manager of a supermarket, and you need to manage the prices and just like charge people and whatnot. So some of the ideas was like no one will ever play that. Actually, you might be proven wrong. So that's one. And then when it comes down to let's say you pinpoint an IP, which maybe it could be a public domain character, which don't necessarily you don't need to rely on anyone to get the approval. But two, it could be a cultural. You can consider as well cultural IPs, local IPs, which might be not well known worldwide, or perhaps try or think about collaborating with emerging media personalities. You don't need to be working with Mr. Beast, because obviously the price tag of Mr. Beast is going to be, no one. Some can, but not many can afford it. But maybe you can come up with a smaller media personalities, i.e., content creators or influencers who have a smaller following, yet you know that you can leverage this following to actually attract a bigger audience to play your game. And it's easier to work with these smaller content creators and influencers just because they're smaller, they're starting, they're really keen to them it's a great opportunity to get more exposure, and to you as a small game developer it's a great way to actually learn the ropes. So don't start with you probably won't be able to afford it, but my suggestion or recommendation would be start with the smaller IPs or smaller media personalities and whatnot. Gather the insights, see if it works for you, and based on that, if you get those insights and you see that it's helping you out, then it makes sense to just keep raising the bar until you, again, not necessarily go after Mr. Beast, but you start talking to bigger content creators who actually have quite an expensive price tag. Ultimately, you want as well to explore niche or classic IPs that they might come with a lower cost. It can be as well an old
Yeah,
movie,
or
old
Monopoly.
movie.
Look at that. I mean,
Oh,
my
yes,
grandparents were playing
yes.
that.
There you go. There you go. It could be, or it could be we called old, but old could be the 90s right now. And it hurts to say it hurts me to say that, but 90s are old now. So you could start leveraging IPs from the 90s that can then hit that target like sweet spot of 40, 45 plus, which for instance, is great for casual puzzle games. So hey, I know that again, going back to the audience feed. I know there is a puzzle casual game that fits my core audience that is a female 45 plus, to looking for like my quote unquote me time or escape time. So I'm gonna try to leverage, I don't know, a TV show that was about cleaning up spaces. I'm just making this up, which was really well known in the UK. I'm just going throughout the niche of the niche, but there is a subset of this genre available in the UK, which probably won't have a really high price tag. I don't know, I'm just going to make this up, 20K, 30K, and you can leverage that, and that right off the bat, many of these core audience are going to be like, oh, I used to remember that watching this TV show when I was a teenager or when I was a kid or with my mom back in, back for summertime, whatever it is, and they can ping on that nostalgia element to get and follow them to play your game.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to our friends at Hunted Cow because before they started working on the big glamorous Hollywood IP, a lot of the games they were producing were turn-based um, tactical war games, based on actual battles from the Second World War and the Civil War. Oh my God! If you want to talk about a hardcore fan base, everything they produced around the American Civil War was just astonishing. And a really, hardcore game genre as well. So again, this is brilliantly valuable. But I would like to kind of follow up and ask if there are studios out there who are interested. How do they go about it? Do you need a licensing agent? Is it lawyers, or do you just hit Google and kind of start looking for contacts? What's the best way forward?
I can speak by experience from Tilting Point. We are lucky to have a super well versed business development team who already have the context in place. So, and as such, we already they are. I'm not. It's not part of my job, but it's a part of my team's job at Tilting Point. Is that they are constantly in touch with the different licensors, so they know, okay, not necessarily that this movie is coming out, but hey, this licensor is available or is willing to produce a new game. Um, it could be, I'm just gonna make up one example, but you can say like, oh, Nickelodeon already have a SpongeBob game. I wonder if they were willing to do another SpongeBob game. Well, it turns out there is 5 or 6 more SpongeBob games. So yes, back then that was Krusty Cook-Off was one of the first ones. Now there are many more. So that shows you that not necessarily they already make or there is already one game available for set IP or license. That doesn't mean that there not cannot be other IP or license based games available. And again, one thing is, I might remember the 2 categories that I was mentioning earlier. One thing is you producing a game that is fully based on that IP or license, which it comes with a title and the whole game, the characters are based on that IP. The other one is like a short-term, 2 weeks, or a month, 3 months implementation, where you already have the game engine and you add on top that IP. Now, you would say, oh well, I don't have a business development person, or again, we're a small team. How do we crack the code, or how do we get started? There are a few events in the space that are licensor based events. Though I think I can't recall the name now, but the biggest one happens in Las Vegas. So you just go there and just like, get to talk with the different licensors, and you see what's available there. But again, Brian, I know I keep repeating this, but it is there is a price cost that you need to make sure that like, hey, I'm not gonna be able to invest so much on UA, or I might have to cut down on my production costs, on development costs, or on creative costs because a chunk of that investment goes into paying the licensor. Now, when it comes down to the money, obviously money talks, but there are, I don't want to say creative ways because we're not reinventing the wheel here, but there might be different means for you to negotiate with an IP or licensor. It could be that you are agreeing with a minimum guaranteed, and then you're doing a revenue share, as in, hey, I'm going to pay you in advance X amount, and then I'm gonna make a percent. I mean, then I'm gonna pay you a percentage based on the revenue that we both make after app stores, commissions, and whatnot. Or you can go right at the bat, like, hey, I'm gonna do, it's a quote unquote older IP, and as such, I'd rather pay you on a revenue. We're a small studio, so I'd rather pay you on a revenue share basis. And these are our projections on how well we think that this game is going to perform. Obviously, that's you as a developer. You're going to be super excited about your game engine, and you're going to put all these ideas together on how well it fits, or can it fit your game engine and whatnot. But you need to think as well on the other side of the coin, which is the brand itself. Does it? You need to think, or you need to demonstrate a clear alignment between your game or the game engine or the IP collaboration that you're going to develop as and the brand values. You want to have like a detailed marketing and engagement strategy because it's going to be a lengthy process, and you want to come with the homework done, as in, oh, I will come back to you in a few weeks with how the integration goes. No, you already have like a pre-made presentation with on how this IP integration is, how do you think this IP integration is going to work in your game, and how do you believe that this is going to benefit as well the brand or the licensor? Because ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, the licensor, their job is to, as the name states, to license that IP. So if you demonstrate to them, hey, for instance, I'm gonna give you an angle. Hey, if I'm making a game that is resonating with your core audience, your brand is going to be more spoken about. I'm going to do as well user acquisition, so I'm going to get more eyeballs to your brand, and as such, I might be pushing back, or I might be like the phoenix. It's my resurging an IP or a brand that has been sleeping, quote unquote, for say 20 years, and now it's becoming popular again thanks to my game. So you want to pick on those or selling points, just to you pick as well on the brand's interest, because maybe it's a small, as you were starting Brian earlier, maybe it's a small or not so well known cartoon back from 25 years ago, and they were like, why would you want to do another game? It's like, well, because I know thanks to gaming, or thanks to mobile gaming, I'm gonna resurface this IP that people are gonna be like, oh, yes, I remember when I used to watch these cartoons when I was a kid, so now I'm gonna play the game, and then I'm gonna be probably buying the limited edition of the comics they may have and whatnot.
Hmm.
So you kind of
The
have that
toy,
experience
the
of,
lunchbox, the
there
duvet
you go.
cover, the
Because
whole lot.
again, you're pitching to an audience that now it's older. So now they have, hopefully they have some disposable income, not only to play your game and to spend on doing in-app purchases or to watch ads, but as well to go back to the brand itself and, oh, I'm gonna buy the lunchbox, or I'm gonna buy the sealed, I don't know, the sealed boxes that were giving away when you were buying eggs. So they decided that collection perspective, that if you're going after, ultimately you're going after that niche audience, and some of that niche audience is a super fan, and that super fan, you might be creating super fans who might feedback on that licensure itself. So that's obviously that's a good way to pitch it to the licensor on, hey, why it makes sense for you to allow us to develop a mobile game. And to be honest with you, many of these IPs, again, I'm talking about the bigger IPs, I'm talking about the smaller ones, they never even, perhaps they know about mobile gaming, but they never even bother to think how this applies to my brand, because they never even thought that it was an option.
So that's a really interesting point. I was going to ask you about that, so I'm really glad you brought it up. Which is, what's the appetite out there from license holders? Are they aware of the mobile games market? Are they familiar with hyper casual, and essentially what the expectations should be for a pitch coming for either something simple and hyper casual, or something far more kind of long term.
I'm going to give you a bit of an ambiguous answer, but the answer is it really depends on who is on the other side of the conversation. Maybe it's a well versed if it's a younger profile, as in someone who gets mobile, someone who has a smartphone and has a TikTok account or an Instagram account and whatnot. They likely are already playing some mobile games, or they're familiar with what mobile gaming entails. If it's an older profile, sure, older demographic do play as well mobile games, but they might have a harder time to see how this can apply to their brand and why it makes sense to actually implement that brand on their game. Ultimately, what you want to make is make a great pitch on how you announce you keep that brand being prevalent throughout the time. So in the past, it was, oh, I'm seeing my brand being advertised, not advertised, being spoken on TV, and that was big news. Or I saw it on the newspaper, not because I paid for it, but because there was an article about whatever happened. So that was, that was you frame the page and you see the framing on the wall because there was a big event back then. Now, the fact that I'm having a mobile developer creating a game and who's actually promoting this game, it should be perceived as it's another medium that is available currently in the space in the 21st century. So it was TV, it was radio, it was newspapers, and now it's mostly it's smartphones and mobile devices. So sure, you can have a YouTube channel. Sure, you can hope that maybe Netflix or Hulu features you in a documentary or whatever it is. But ultimately, hey, I have a developer team who is really passionate about gaming, and they are really keen on leveraging my brand so I can reach a potential audience who is not, again, it's not a YouTube channel, it's not a Netflix, it's throughout a game. And look, if I type my brand name or my IP on the App Store or Google Play or throughout Google search, the game is going to show up there. So that's another mean for me to keep or make that IP or brand prevalent throughout the years.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great way of looking at it. Just another medium. It's one of
Phenomenal.
those
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
another multimedia. It's where people are. So yeah, you're on all of the above and in a game. It's just an extension of the brand.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you want to make sure as a as a developer that you want to prove as well that you have the means of making it happen. And you again, I was mentioning earlier, you want to come with your homework prepared. But unfortunately, if you have never released a game ever, then it's really be hard for any brand to take you seriously. So obviously, you need to start from the bottom, which is like, hey, I released this game. I don't know, just get some key KPIs or metrics that you can showcase. Hey, I know what I'm doing, or look, I created this game at the end of or like last year, and we got, I don't know, 50,000 downloads. To someone who is not super well versed in the mobile space, $50,000 downloads might sound like, don't get me wrong, it's a lot of downloads, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not such a big number. But yet, for a small brand or license, like, hey, I got $50,000 on this app, and this is people who are playing. I'm just gonna make this app at least 10 minutes a day throughout 7 days. So it's you multiply that time by the eyeballs, and yet look, I'm gonna give you this much more exposure on a brand that actually you're not making a lot out of it. But you need to start for somewhere, right? So at least you need to have some a portfolio, or like if you go again to work with better, well-known or bigger brands, you need to have had first a chance to work with a smaller brand so you can showcase, look, I did this work with these guys, and this is a smaller entity, or this is a smaller IP in Scotland, and now I'm aiming for the big cartoon US cartoon base that in the 90s that was super popular. It's a different league on its own, yet you need to come like with some pedigree, if you want to call it somehow.
You've covered so many things in and around branding and licensing, but for those smaller studios who have maybe had their first success, their breakthrough, is product placement, is that kind of brand takeover a possibility, or is that something that's maybe a little too esoteric and outside your field?
That's a really good point. And actually, I was mentioning you right at the beginning of this podcast that how I started in advertising and mobile gaming. My master thesis was about in-game advertising. Back then, I'm talking about many years ago, but back then, I yes, the conclusion was that it did not work. But I'm happy to say that now that's it's not the case anymore. It does work. It's just that you need to have the thing about the product placement itself. Back then my thesis, I'm talking about again many years ago, so excuse me for referring back to something so old, but I was thinking, or in my mind was like the stereotype of like you're playing a football or a soccer game, and you see the billboards on the sides, like that's as far as you could, or maybe you see a racing game and you see the big billboards on the road. That's as far as the thesis went back then, because we're talking about unfortunately many years ago. Now, when you think about, as we all said, Brian, product placement, hey, it's like we're going to use the example of a game that we recently, again, I say recent, but time flies. We released last year, which is called Fashion Verse, which, as the name states, is about fashion. And on that game, it makes total sense. You have brands, fashion brands, who are quote unquote advertising their items within the game. Why that's product placement? Because hey, it's a perfect fit. I'm putting together outfits for a certain events that's what the game is about, and as such, I get to, for instance, pick a handbag from Michael Kors first. Michael Kors is going to be stoked or super happy to get their handbags placed on the game, and two, the player, the fashion burst player is like, oh, I love Michael Kors, or of course I know Michael Kors. I've seen their handbags all over the place, and maybe I cannot afford them, or maybe I do have one, and I wish I had this other model, or maybe you're talking about or this specific handbag that you couldn't buy back then, and now you can buy it throughout the game, or maybe it's for free because you have some in-game currency available. So it's a perfect fit both for the brand who has to advertise with the top of mind for the player, and two for the player or for the game developer because they're leveraging a brand that is spot on the game that they developed.
Clearly, managing IP is a mammoth task. You have to understand the fit, it has to fit with the mechanics, and it always will depend. Do you want to do something that's just a quick integration with the game engine or something deeper? So there's a lot to consider there, but there's also a lot to consider when you're managing a team to achieve this. And that has its unique challenges. Now, what's interesting about you, Enric, is that you have adopted a tilting point. First of all, you have a process for this. And secondly, you've got one heck of a team because you've got more than 50 now. So that's keeping them motivated, working. What are you doing to make that happen? Are there tools, practices, best practices? How do you make collaboration possible? Because, of course, smaller studios, smaller teams, things can get streamlined. Bigger teams, they can get stalled.
First and foremost, obviously, is to keep. I mean, that's an obvious one, but just to keep everyone motivated. But it's going back, and it's going to be one of those things like duh, of course. But that basic stuff, it's what actually does make a difference. Is to make sure that everyone is clear on their mission and on their core KPIs, as in what means that I'm doing. Not Enric. I mean, I think I have pretty clear what my role is. But if I go to speak with say a community manager, or I go to speak myself, or I speak to the lead, hey, let's make sure that this profile, that your team is fully aligned on what they're supposed to be doing, that every team member is really clear on what's their job mission, what are the key metrics, as in how I am going to be measured, or how I know that I'm doing the right job, or that I'm actually effectively investing my time on what I'm supposed to be doing. And on the other hand as well is be super clear on the overall on a company level, what our objectives and key results. We invested actually a decent amount of time. We do it on a yearly basis, and it should be something new to everyone. But again, it's to the basics, but it does really make a difference. Hey, these are our objectives for 2024. These are the key results that we're going to be tracked to make sure that we are hitting these objectives. So we break this down by department and by game team, and then we have certain objectives, which now we're trying to be like certain, going to higher rather than mid-level. So you need to be like stretch levels, and then you make sure that on an ongoing basis you check with your core team, or at least with my leads, that we are working towards those key results and therefore towards those objectives. Now, if we speak about growth itself, which is the department that I oversee, in the past, and this depends, it really depends on a company by company basis, but what I realized throughout my years is that sure, on most companies you have a UA profile and an ASO profile and an ad monetization profile, and that makes sense on a certain setup. But when you are working, and it applies both for big companies and small companies, and I do believe that actually it does work, and that's hence I'm sharing it today. We decided about a year and a half ago that instead of having these separate siloed quote unquote growth profiles, we would put them under what we call a game growth manager. So that's a profile that not only oversees UA, but as well oversees app store optimization and ad monetization. Now, people hearing this podcast are going to be like, well, Enric, this is great, but it's impossible for a human being to be able to manage everything. And yes, that's true. But that's why we have a team in place where you try to rely on other people, but we try to mitigate or to reduce to the zero the answer of like, well, that's not my responsibility because that's on ASO, or that's because that's on admin, or that's on product. I'm specifically talking about growth because that's a department that I oversee, but this applies throughout Tilting Point in every department. Sure, again, you have your KPIs or your key responsibilities, and that's what you're going to be measured upon. But if you look into the grand scheme of things, anything that your core game team does, it should have an impact on whichever task or key result you have ultimately. So I can go down to a community manager. Why do I care what product team does? Well, you actually care a lot, because if the features that your core audience, your community is asking are not heard, then your job is going to be a nightmare, because you're going to be constantly, replying back to angry customers or angry players on why this feature is not fixed or why this happened and so on and so forth. And the other way around, if product quote unquote does a good job, then they're going to be like, oh, we want to know more about what our core player base thinks about X, Y, and Z, rather than only looking at the core numbers, which we all do, which is looking, hey, is LTV increasing? Is CPR reducing? Is my retention, was my day 90, day 180, and so on and so forth? Yes, these are core metrics, but ultimately there are other metrics that you need to work alongside other team members within a game team, a core game team, because all of them are part of the game success. So what Tilting Point, what we do is we grow games, and in such, or the realization that came not long ago, about a year and a half ago, is that we had, going back to the growth department, I had to make sure that I was breaking down those walls from the silos, because there was no way, like it was like an ongoing, oh, that's UA's team, or that's the creative team, or that's game team, and there is no, your team is the game team, and as such you need to all be aligned in order to make this game a success. And it could be X, Y, and Z, and that's what I've been working on for the last 3 years now at Tilting Point.
It's such a good strategy. I'm so encouraged to hear that you're doing that, because most of the companies I'm talking with, they're like, yeah, we need to break down the silos, and that's just it. And you've done it, and you've shown that it matters because everyone is on the same page. It's about growth. It's not, are you admon and therefore achieving growth? Are you UA and therefore achieving growth? It's like, it is the business of the team.
And you need to keep repeating, on a weekly basis, on what's the objectives, what are the key results, what's your mission. But that's, again, going back to what I was mentioning 10 minutes ago, that's why you want to be super clear on the responsibilities, but then as well to, so everyone knows, okay, I know that this is happening, so I know I have to talk to this profile because I know that there's their core key responsibility, yet this has a direct impact on how well I'm going to be doing, because this is my key result. As in, if I don't get more players to my game, and I'm going to get more ad views, and as such, my CPM might be high, but my impressions are going to be low. So my key result on making X amount of ad monetization is going to be unachievable. So you have to backtrack to the basics. Yet when you put it in the paper, it's really easy. When you get down to actually get to your team members to actually understanding it, it's a matter of repetition and making, being super clear on the basics. And with that, you want to think as well that you're working with grown up or adults, all doing their best to make their job their best too. And as such, when you come as well with that idea as a starters, then things tend to work. Ultimately, you want to showcase what's the guide, will be the North Star for your team, because that's ultimately, as you well said, Peggy Emerald, right? I am managing over 50 people, so you want to be that guide. And ultimately, as myself, and now I'm speaking on my behalf as a manager, most of my time ends up being talking to my team or my leads to make sure that we are all aligned. And then just what I told, it's a sentence that I like to use quite often, but like, my job is to make their life easier in terms of work. Personal life, I cannot get involved in that. Even if that's on their house and their time, we spend our plenty of time throughout the webcams and the Slack. But at least at work, if there is an issue that stops you from making things happen, let me know. I'm gonna do my best to mitigate that, because ultimately we're coming with a principle like, hey, maybe there's a misalignment between teams, maybe there's a misunderstanding of what's your key result, or maybe there is a different way to approach the same problem, which is absolutely fine. It's just you need to align with different team members. The bigger and you realize it when, of course, the company grows, but maybe for a smaller game teams, like maybe it's 3, 4, 5 people, it comes to a point where your team is going to grow. You're going to be 10, 15, 20, 30 people. And these things which seem basic, or like, oh, I wish we were back to the time where it was only 5 people and we were aligned. If you're doing your job, quote unquote, properly as a leader, then this realization won't come to place, because you're really going to keeping up with the same way that you were operating back then. It's just that you need to adapt to the new circumstances, which is having a bigger team. Therefore, you need to make sure that everyone's aligned, because just for this, you have more people to manage.
Before you go, there are two questions we ask all of our guests. The first is, what are you playing right now? What's obsessing you? What's taking up all your time where you should be, leading your people? And the second question, favorite game of all time?
So the one that I've been playing, because I was seeing, not as much now, because I downloaded the game and I played. It's called The Legend of Mushrooms, which is a clicker game, which was been heavily advertised for a while. So I've been playing this, throughout many other games that I have to keep the eyes on. That's the one that I've been playing now the most. But again, this changes on a weekly basis. I was playing as well the cleaning carpet game earlier, so there is that. My favorite mobile game of all time, it's called The Binding of Isaac, which is a role-like shooter game. It's hard, but it's really fun. I mean, it's like a bit of a dark humor there. So if you never played, it's a roguelike, so it's hard, but it's available on many platforms now. And my most the game I want to say, I played many games, but the one that I have the fondest memories is Battlefield 1942. Um, that was like I used to play a lot of Counter Strike and FPS and whatnot, but that was one of the first ones where objects were being destroyed throughout the battle, and that was like mind blowing to me. We're talking about many, many, many years ago, though.
Enric, it has been an absolute joy. It has been mind blowing, and I think there's so much that we're going to be hearing about, writing about on the site moving forward. And I can't wait to get my hands on Godzilla versus Kong, Titan
Please do.
Chasers, once it's out of soft launch.
All right. Thank you, Peggy, and thank you, Brian, for having me. Really appreciate it.
This show is all about how to do your job better, how to make an amazing game, how to market it, and you have a say. So if you have a story or know someone we need to shine a light on, then we would love to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. We want to reflect the reality of the mobile games market in all its wonderful complexity and strangeness. So if you have any suggestions for us, if you have any feedback for us, you can always get in touch. You can email us at podcast@pocketgamer.biz. You can find us on Twitter @PGBiz, and you can reach out to us through the pocketgamer.biz website. If you're interested in listening to all of our podcasts, you can find them at pocketgamer.biz/podcast, and we would love to hear your thoughts on future shows.
And we've got you covered on all the major platforms, so subscribe to the audio podcast, as Brian said. Look for us on YouTube. If you want to read it, hey, you can do that too, because we have a companion post for you as well on the pocketgamer.biz website.
Tune in again for the next edition of the pocketgamer.biz podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you in the near future.